This is the Dynasty Roundtable podcast, and we're back old school. We had the new school graphics last time, and for everybody on the podcast, everybody that's listening to the podcast, this is great for you because you have no idea what we're talking about. But we are staring at an old school spreadsheet. This is Dynasty Roundtable old school. We're trying to morph into the graphics and the techno lights and the what the kids like. So we're gonna get there, but I didn't have enough time to make all the shiny bright graphics for this episode. So we're back to the spreadsheet, which I actually kind of like, to be honest with you. But I don't know how you feel about it, Mr. Babbage, and how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. I like the spreadsheet view. I think it's a little bit. The benefit is that we get to kind of see your ranking and my ranking and where we differ, because you'd be shocked kind of how we could be very far off on a player and kind of arrive at a consensus ranking. So you get a little deeper of a peek behind the curtain here.
Yeah, and I'm not going to waste any time. These are the rankings, and this is tier 1. And in tier 1, oh boy, we have 3 players. How is that? How can that be? We have Bijan Robinson, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, and we have Ashton Jeanty, who, Matt, you have at RB2 ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. Explain yourself.
Explain myself. Okay, well, you look at what Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs have done in the first 2 seasons of their career. With Gibbs, you have an RB8 and an RB2 season in fantasy points per game. With Bijan, you have an RB3. And, albeit there were a lot of reasons why he finished at RB17 in 2023 in fantasy points per game, being good at football and having plenty of opportunities wasn't really one of them. So you have, 1, maybe 2 seasons of top 5 potential here for a draft pick in Jeanty. And I get it. There's the mystery box situation. He could even be a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson. And I couldn't put him over Bijan Robinson because of that. However, what was important for me to take the context of, first of all, he is 21. So the fact of the matter is he does have 2 years on his lifespan ahead of some of those guys. I think you can take age into account when it comes to running backs at the tippy top, because you're saying to yourself, if Jeanty is Bijan Robinson and Gibbs, that level of talent, I believe he is, then I get an extra 2 years on top of, near equal value in a couple of these guys. So I think there's that edge to him. Now let's look at the situation in Las Vegas. Are they the best team? Not necessarily. They are going to be improved from last year vastly. Head coach Pete Carroll he loved running backs. Let me tell you that. He loved running backs. Marshawn Lynch, in all 4 fully healthy seasons as a Seahawk, had over 300 touches. He was pacing for 300 touches in 2015, but only played through 7 games. Then we look at 2017. Trivia, Seth.
Okay.
Who led the 2017 Seahawks in rushing attempts?
Oh, man. 2017. Gosh, that's a weird...
this was post Marshawn Lynch, so not on the team.
I know who it is, but I can't think of it. It's not It was before Kenneth Walker.
Well before Kenneth
Walker. Gosh. Tell me. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it.
So it wasn't CJ Procise, it wasn't Chris Carson, it wasn't Thomas Rawls, it wasn't Eddie Lacy, it was Russell Wilson.
Chris Carson was the guy I was thinking of. Yeah.
Carson, though, I'm glad you said that, because Carson then went on to had 281 touches in 14 games in 2018 and 305 touches in 15 games in 2019. And then the OC, if you haven't known, is Chip Kelly. So I don't really think I need to go back and go through the history of LaShawn McCoy and his usage in Chip Kelly's system. So this is their guy. You have a head coach who's crazy about a lead running back, a bell cow running back. You have an offensive coordinator who's batshit crazy about a bell cow running back. And they look in their past and Pete Carroll with Lynch and makeshift Carson and Chip Kelly with LaShawn McCoy. They went out and selected Ashton Genty with a top tier first round pick. That to me means something. I think he potentially gets 300 touch. I think he could be a Jacobs in that Raiders offense where he's a better talent, but he's, even if the team is mediocre, he's going to be getting fed the rock. So you can make the argument any which way, right? You have Gibbs, Bijan, Genty, and this is why I believe they're tier 1, because I struggled with this for a long time. I still kind of want to make Genty my RB1. Bijan just in that Atlanta system. I think the big thing with Gibbs too for me, sorry, one last aside, is the 54% opportunity share last year, even with I believe Dave Montgomery missing some time to doing it to an injury. That's the concerning part for me, is where I don't see that concern with Bijan and Genty. I see 65% plus opportunity share for the both of them. Bijan had he was third, I believe, in red zone touches, despite the Falcons being terrible or mediocre at best, I should say. So I think you can make any argument, you can take any stat, any perspective you want, and you can land at your desired order of the 3. But I firmly believe Genty is going to be a 16, 17 fantasy point per game guy rookie.
Yeah, this is the classic battle of efficiency versus volume, because you're correct. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 31 amongst running backs in opportunity share. That is rushes plus receiving work out of the backfield. What I love about him is he gets the targets. I mean, he's as efficient as it gets, the most efficient running back in fantasy football. Bijan is going to get I was doing projections for Atlanta the other day. You can just pencil him in for 300 touches. I mean, that's what he's going to get this year. He got 304 rush attempts, 61 receptions on 72 targets. So he's another one of these running backs that touched the ball 370 times, over 370 times last year. And that Atlanta offense should be pretty decent. We'll see how good Michael Penix is. There's some uncertainty there, so I can understand why some people would have. Well, I guess I do have Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of Bijan. You're the one who has Bijan ahead. You're going for the volume, and I understand your argument. I would. What'd you say? What was that ooh for?
I don't like the way that was formed. It's not that I am going for the volume because efficiency is not sticky. So I'm going with what's stickier, and that's the volume.
Well, you could argue that they could ramp up Jahmyr Gibbs's volume this year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said
so. There's room for growth potentially.
That's why I said you literally can take any perspective you want.
But
Jacobs had a 75% opportunity share in like 2021. Like those cases happen. Like, why can't Bijan do that? Like, if you want to make the case for opportunity share growth, I can make the same one.
Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, there seems like there's room for growth there, at least from an opportunity perspective. And I get it. 20 total touchdowns this past year is insane. But he gets work near the red zone, which I found surprising. 4th in red zone touches amongst running backs last year, even with David Montgomery there. I mean, I think you're right. I think if you came, it's similar to the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase argument. If you were absolutely adamant that you wanted Bijan over Jahmyr Gibbs in a startup, I wouldn't have a major issue with it. If you said Genty over both of them, I probably would. But just because we've seen it from Bijan, I mean, he was the RB3 last year. Gibbs was the RB1 in fantasy, or RB2 rather, fantasy points per game, RB1 overall. So I get it. You get some age with Genty, but I just can't get there to RB2, or even, you're going all crazy and maybe putting him at RB1, RB2 for now. So that's just how I see it.
Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this. Let's say Genty has the season that Bijan Robinson just had last year for his rookie season. So he's scoring, he's third in fantasy points per game. Let me rephrase it. What kind of season does Genty have, do you think, where you're like, yeah, he probably should be RB1, or he should definitely be in this group? Because I haven't heard from you that you're convinced that Genty should be in this tier. In fact, I was the one that made you put Genty in this tier.
Yeah, so if he goes out and finishes top 10 in fantasy points per game this year, which is absolutely on the table.
Like Gibbs, rookie season RB8, something like that.
Yeah, he's definitely in the conversation for RB1. Now, I'll say on the other hand, if Jahmyr Gibbs goes out and has another season like he had this year with potentially a smidge more opportunity, then he's for sure the RB1. Same with, I mean, there's just so many these guys at the top. This is the tippy top. This is the cream of the crop, right? As Macho Man Randy Savage would say. This is the cream of the crop. That's a horrible impression. But you're going to have to do, you're going to have, if you come for the title of RB1, you're going to have to, like, I don't even know if top 10 RB in fantasy points per game season would propel him there. It just depends on what these other running backs do, but I'll say this.
I don't know, man. Look, I'm going to make a prediction. If that happens, what you just laid out, you're going to be saying a year from now, like, hey, like Gibbs was the RB1 in fantasy points per game last year, but like realistically, you could tear down to Genty and get a little something on top. And think about just saying that, a year ago. I can already foresee the tear down argument to Ashton Genty a year from now after he smashes.
There's a stat out there, and ironically, I think both Gibbs. Well, no, I don't think Gibbs does, because Gibbs was taken 12th overall. Is that right? 2 years ago, in the Kansas City draft, the draft at Kansas City. Top 10 running backs, and this is coming from South Harmon and on their last AMA. Which, by the way, I'm going to be on South Harmon's AMA tonight. We're recording this Wednesday, May 28th, and I'm going to be on the AMA here in about an hour. Running backs drafted in the top 10 have a 100% hit rate, top 12 season within the first 3 years. So there you go. There's a stat for you. So by that metric, Genty is guaranteed, or he would be an outlier if he didn't have a top 12 season in the next 3 seasons. So yes. So here's the real conversation, okay? If you are as convicted as you are about Genty, what could you get if you had Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs and you want to tear down to Genty? What do you think you could get? Could you get a second, like a second round rookie pick?
I don't think so. I mean, Player Profiler's got him as their RB1 overall. Like, I would imagine on Keep Trade Cut, it's gonna be close. Like, I don't think you're gonna get maybe a second. Yeah.
So you're thinking that that people, like we're talking the people in the streets, like the Dynasty streets, like the good people in our audience. You think the people, because I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut right now. Bijan Robinson's player 8 overall, and yes, this is in a super flex. Jahmyr Gibbs, they have Jahmyr Gibbs number 9 overall, and they have Genty at 13 overall. So yeah, I suppose it's in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, they have it like as 300, value points off from Gibbs and 500 from Bijan Robinson. Like, there's not a lot that's worth that, like, in this system. So like, if I go to the trade calculator live right now, and again, this is just great podcasting, but if I put Bijan on team,
I can filibuster with my favorite
on team 2
recipes involving mustard. If you want, I could get my mustard cookbook out.
It says players to even trade: Jerome Ford, Jordan Whittington, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, 2025 early 4th. So if we're talking about the street valuation, they're favoring my argument that they're very close.
That is a sliver of a sliver, is what that is. That is like nothing. So basically, these are even assets right now, according to the public, according to Keep Trade Cut, according to the trade calculator that you're looking at. So yeah, I mean, so there's not much you can get on top right now, basically. So yeah, I guess he does belong.
They do
I
technically
still
have
think,
him as a
yeah,
separate tier, like when you look at things. So
yeah.
I guess that's just how, depending on how you view tiers. But
All right. Well, let us know what you think in the comments, and we have successfully gone 13, 14 minutes on just tier one. So give us a like, give us a subscribe if you
I
like
thought
what we're doing here.
I thought about
Uh,
that. At the same time, I think that that's probably going to be the part of the conversation that the viewers are potentially most interested to hear about. But anyway,
oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. So we have Saquon Barkley at 4. I have him at 4. You have him at 6. Surprisingly, because Saquon Barkley was one of my sells, and I do have him at 4, but kind of by process of elimination. Devon Chain at 5. So Barkley, we've talked about him. We talked about him in our sells. He was the RB1 in fantasy points per game last year. I already laid out the history of the RB1s in fantasy football over the last 5 years, how there has not been a repeat RB1. And typically the RB1, that workload has consequences. And I was going back and forth with somebody in the YouTube comments today, basically, and maybe I'm a hypocrite because I put Barkley at 4, but I don't think I am, because I don't really think that there's anybody that I felt like I should put ahead of Barkley. You clearly do, so we'll talk about that here in a minute. But Barkley, to me, I'm ranking him because I think this is where his value is. If you go to Keep Trade Cut right now, he is player. When I last looked, he was player 22, so he's fallen 6 spots. So he's player 28 overall. That's kind of interesting. RB4, and I'll just be honest, I don't really like the running back position all that much. So if I can, I'll say it again. I think that there's a real chance that Saquon Barkley, he's got to come through as a top 5 running back because he's 28 years old in order to cash in on this value. Like, I get it. It's Saquon Barkley. What are you looking at me like that for?
no, keep going, keep going.
Okay. I get it. It's Saquon Barkley. He's ultra talented, but these types of seasons when you get 350 plus touches, and you're 20, not 23 years old anymore, you're 27, 28 years old, history would tell us, as I've laid out before, I'll probably put a tweet out there, that doesn't typically go well the next season. Now, is his efficiency going to tank? Probably not. I mean, he could be Derrick Henry incarnate. That's a possibility, and this could blow up in my face. And I have him ranked higher than Matt Babbage, so I don't really.
That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
If you believe all this, then why'd you rank him at 4?
Because I don't like running backs. There was nobody else. I wanted to, but there was nobody else. I had to be honest with myself and the audience. There's nobody else that I felt belonged ahead of him right now, and this is where I think his value is. And I would definitely tear down to another option that we can talk about here a little bit later on, because I feel like you can get good production, maybe not, Saquon Barkley last year level production, which he could absolutely put up that kind of a season this year. I understand that, but the chances of it happening, his history would tell us, are not very good. So what do we do with that? That's kind of where I am with this ranking. Is I put him here by process of elimination. So tell me why you put him at 6. Is that might have been the worst take I've given out this year? I don't know.
It's literally just from all of the reasons that you just stated. You quite literally made my case for me, to be very honest with you. Achin is someone who's going to continue to kind of go under the radar, I think, because of his size. But he proved that he pretty much spelled the doubts that were, holding him back in terms of his, really exploding in his fantasy value. He literally went out and repeated another 17 fantasy or point per game fantasy season. but finished fourth among running backs in total weighted opportunities because he played a 17-game season. Like, people said that he wasn't going to be able to handle that type of workload. He had a 16% target share. This dude's incredible. He led all running backs with receptions with 80. Like, we could be seeing like a new Kamara kind of before our eyes in terms of, a guy with just insane athleticism and natural running ability. And he's just a bit of a smaller guy than Kamara, but he knows how to take contact. Like, he's doing the right things. And then I have Omarion Hampton, spoiler alert, ahead, the same guy you were talking about tearing down to. I have it 4 because the dude's a tank.
Oh my
He's going to be in
God.
a Greg Roman offense.
Should we just
And
reveal tier 3 right now?
yeah,
All right, because
he's
people
going to be in
can't
a Greg
see
Roman
you.
offense that's dedicated
They
to the
can't
running
see
back.
him.
Najee Harris is basically on a 1-year deal. I don't see what there isn't to be all in on with Hampton right now. Yeah, you may not have the perfect year 1 season. I don't. Here's my philosophy on rankings to close this argument out real quick. I don't believe in ranking someone, say 7 or 8, if I believe by midway of this season, full, all the way through the rest of the season, if I feel like Omarion Hampton's going to be RB4 at the end of the season, this is Dynasty. He's 22 years old or whatever. I'm going to put him there now. That's not the way it works for everybody, mind you. But for me, it is, because I feel fake if I think that's where his value is going to be and is right now. And then I put him at 8 or 9 to be safe because he's a rookie and he hasn't done a lot. And then when he explodes, I go, yeah, Hampton RB4. That's how you're late to the party. And I don't like doing that. I'd rather fall flat on my face and then go with it and put Hampton at 4.
Yeah, and you're kind of making me feel fake right now because that made
That's
a lot
not
of
what I
sense.
meant to imply, by the way.
No, it's all right. There's just all of these rankings are. I'm looking at them now, and I'm thinking to myself, because here's what I'm realizing as we're recording this right now. If I am running back agnostic, which most of the time I am, then why wouldn't I just lean toward, like, for the Omarion Hampton example? If his comp is Jonathan Taylor, which for me he was, like, I thought that was a pretty good comp for him, and I get it, there's some competition for him this year in Najee Harris, but if I think he's eventually going to be Jonathan Taylor, like, why wouldn't I just take that risk? The way I play Dynasty anyway, which I'm typically an ageist, in this case, you're the one who is propelling the younger players up the board. So I think
Elite players.
Younger elite players in an elite running back class that we just witnessed, and Omarion Hampton first round draft capital to a situation we love, minus maybe Najee Harris is the only roadblock for now. Yeah, why wouldn't I start to propel these younger players up? And from a team building perspective, this is what I've found. My most successful teams are the ones where I hate to say this because Alan Seslowsky calls this the win never strategy, and I think that's, with all due respect to Alan, I disagree. When you go young initially with your dynasty build and you take Omarion Hampton over Jonathan Taylor, exactly what you're talking about, which is why I think I need to adjust these rankings. We'll still present them. We're not going to stop the episode. But when you make that decision to focus on youth and upside, those assets typically, and I'm not saying always, but typically, people want those kinds of players, A, and B, their value typically, and more times than not, in my experience, goes up. Right? Now, are there scenarios and possibilities where Omarion Hampton isn't a good player and his value tanks? Sure, like that can happen. But if you strategically build around youth and upside and value in the dynasty startup, which is what I'm talking about here, which is what your rankings are reflected to this side of things than mine are, in this episode, which is what is making me have kind of a out of body experience right now. Like, how did I not, when I was making these adjustments, which is kind of why I'm starting to think like ranking shows are not my favorite ones to do, because I feel like every time I want to just take a step back and go, okay, like, how did I fuck up? And then that's what everybody in the YouTube audience is kind of saying too,
See, I
and
disagree because I
okay.
like we usually for the audience, these rankings are not out of the oven for very long. We'll say that before we record.
Yeah.
We usually plan to do it much before, and then much like people with busy lives, it gets put off to the last minute. And that's why I like it, because we have just kind of, it may even been the day before or whatever, but we just got done going through this process. And even if there are holes in it, because I have certainly had ranking shows, and this, where I've gone like, oh my gosh, like what on earth was I thinking when I did this? But we talk about that because we did know what we were thinking when we did it. It's what we came here to talk about. So we talk
Yeah.
through that process, and we go
And
against each other,
yeah.
and that's what I've liked, because I feel like the less refined our rankings are in terms of kind of having these conversations and then going back and editing them, we butt heads a little bit more. We have a little bit more developed and nuanced conversations, and I don't know. Maybe you tell us, audience, if you like these conversations that we're having, but I think these are some of our best shows.
Yeah, because it's yeah.
We're not
Now that
teaching
I'm
you. We're
thinking
not
about that.
telling you this is where you should have a player
Okay.
ranked. We are giving our thought process and inviting, challenging the viewers' thoughts and inviting them to join in the discussion.
Yeah. And yeah, let us know what you think. I think that's well said. I think I will be making some adjustments to my rankings after this show. So maybe we'll have to have another episode of the running backs. But
Quick for the
I
podcast audience, just going to recap tiers 1 through
good
3
call.
before we get into
Good
tier
call.
4. We have Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ashton Genty in tier 1, Saquon Barkley and Devon Chain in tier 2, Amarian Hampton, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, and Bucky Irving round out tier 3.
So tier 4, which I just unveiled, is Trevion Henderson. We're both, I think, ahead of consensus with him. I thought I would be high. Again, I'm typically ageist, especially with running backs, but
I might be a
Matt,
little high here, to be completely honest, and I have bias that's going to be hard to shake off.
yeah. So he's
RB8 on keep trade cut.
Yeah. Is he really? He's RB8 on keep trade cut.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I thought they were kind of low on the rookies. I didn't realize that. So we have him as our RB. What would that be? 10. Kenneth Walker as Trevion Henderson is our RB 11. Kenneth Walker 12. Josh Jacobs 13. James Cook 14. Chase Brown 15. So we have 15 here. Any particular direction you want to go with this? You know me, I'm in love with Trevion Henderson. I didn't get him. I just didn't have the rookie pick that was required to get a Trevion Henderson, and then whenever he was there, it felt like Cam Ward was available. So I didn't end up with a ton of Trevion Henderson, not as much as I would have wanted, but I'm going to try to alleviate that in the trade market this offseason and potentially in some startups. So
it's the perfect fit for the New England offense. He's a full 3-down back who excels at pass protection. So I know that's a big thing that stood out with Mike Vrabel and the coaching staff there in New England. And I wanted Luther Burden, just given the wide receiver needs that this team had. But when Trevion Henderson's name came across the board, across the screen, I couldn't be upset, just because he just seems very perfect for this Josh McDaniels offense, and somebody who can actually operate in a true 3-down role. Stevenson's not going away, mind you, particularly in year 1, but I do believe Henderson is going to be the main guy. Stevenson's has had issues with fumbling, with pass protection, with staying healthy. And I don't think any of those 3 things are going to do him any favors when Trevion Henderson gets out and running. So I do admit, I think 8 might be a little bit a bit of a stretch. I think Taylor and even Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, I think that they have strong arguments, and Kenneth Walker too, for being a little bit higher up in the conversation. But I feel like, Kyron has, team uncertainty in terms of where he's going to be after this year with LA. And then, once that happens, you can find yourself in a Najee Harris situation really quickly, even though you're only 25. Jonathan Taylor is, on the wrong part of the age curve, but still an elite asset who's proven. And I do think in drafts, you need to be taking calculated bets. So I think even if I'm trying to go young, a calculated bet I may make is taking Jonathan Taylor over Travion Henderson for someone with a little bit more name brand value. Because if I'm going to ship a running back to a contender, let's say I go young and I stink. If I'm going to ship a guy, a running back to a contender and extend my team's shelf life while acquiring some assets, who am I going to have an easier time trading, given that, his playoff heroics last year, he always seems to, even when he's struggling, he's playing well. Jonathan Taylor is going to be the easier piece to offload, most likely, because I do think there's going to be a little bit of a runaway hype train in terms of Vrabel and McDaniels returning and Drake May year 2, Diggs coming in. Who knows? We don't really know exactly how healthy he is. So I think there's a lot of risk with the Travion Henderson, and I have built the young team with instability before, and it doesn't pan out. So I think there are certain bets like Taylor over Henderson. I think that is a switch I may make in the rankings. I'm not exactly sure yet, but that would be the case for, maybe pushing Henderson down a little bit.
Yeah, but I think Travion Henderson,
He's awesome.
I think he's going to be really good. So I don't hate your ranking at all, to be honest with you. And I don't know, like, you have them back to back. So I if you wanted to swap them, I suppose that's fine. But
I don't think I would be able to take Bucky Irving over Henderson in a startup draft. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be Bucky. So Bucky Irving's interesting because Rachaad White is still there. And I get it. Bucky Irving had an amazing season last year, but there is some competition for him still, even though I get it. Rachaad White, super inefficient. Bucky Irving's way better. How could you think that? James Cook is the guy that we have the biggest disagreement with here. And it's funny because you were Mr. James Cook a year ago, and it's just funny how things change. But I'm looking at James Cook, and to be honest with you, he's one of these players that I probably want to sell, but I feel like everybody thinks that. So when everybody see, this is maybe my blessing or my curse. I can't really decide. When everybody's on one side, Matt, my instincts and my gut just wants to be on the other side. And I don't know if sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's not a good thing. I'd like to think it's more times it's a good thing. But so let me get this straight. The Bills didn't add a running back. I get it. James Cook, he wants a new contract, and that's a whole weird situation, and that's a big deal. But they didn't add another running back. I get it. They have Ray Davis. I understand they have there's a Ty Johnson is a pass catcher, but James Cook on a similar workload as Jahmyr Gibbs, similar, not the same, because you look at James Cook's opportunity last year, and that's why I mean there are some concerns with his workload, like less than a 50% snap share, number 25 in opportunity share, doesn't get targeted out of the backfield, but he's the starting running back for the Buffalo Bills. So here's how I'm playing this particular situation. If I can buy James Cook on the cheap, why wouldn't I just try James Cook and Ray Davis and have both of them? If I can get a backfield cornered, why wouldn't I do that? If everybody is going to fade him, like, okay, well then I'll take your player you don't want and hedge with a Ray Davis. Your thoughts?
You're saying get Cook and Ray Davis on the same team?
Yeah, why not?
Nah. I just because I think it's a backfield that cannibalizes itself. I don't hate it because I also could see a world where James Cook does not become not stay a Bill after this year. In
Yeah.
that case, you're getting another dice roll at Ray Davis having a bigger role in Buffalo, and then James Cook not being on the same team now, so you kind of have potentially two usable players there. So I don't necessarily hate it, especially because Ray Davis is really cheap, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily cost you a lot to do it.
And Ty
Um,
Johnson's probably free if you wanted to add, if there's you even have room for Ty Johnson. Probably
I,
not.
why would they pay him with the way these situations work? Why would they pay him? He's a second round guy. Like, you're either going to pay him, give him touches next year, and risk him being, I don't know, maybe stinking or getting hurt and sustaining some sort of injury where they're now, maybe on the hook for a guy they weren't in love with enough to extend. And they did extend him. And now he's these teams want flexibility. And we're seeing, options not getting picked up on running backs, and they're not getting franchise tagged as much anymore. We're seeing these running backs rotate teams a lot because we get these generational draft classes once every few years. We got talented running backs like, say what you will about Najee. He's a pretty talented running back to hit the free agent market.
Mm-hmm.
And they could just as easily bring in someone like that next year. I don't know who the upcoming free agents are, but that's likely the case. So when I look at the board here, I'm looking at all the people I'll go within 10 spots or 8 spots each way of James Cook. Superflex, not tight end premium. Sam Laporta, Kyron Williams, Devonta Smith, Roma Dunze, Bryce Young, Emeka Egbuka, Kenneth Walker III, Josh Jacobs. Then on the other side, Xavier Worthy, Chase Brown, Christian McCaffrey, RJ Harvey, Jordan Addison, Caleb Johnson. I would literally take almost every single player there instead of James Cook, and gun to my head, I had to draft James Cook or trade out of that pick. I would trade out of the pick. He just seems like a ticking time bomb in Dynasty. No one's confident that he's going to be the Bills guy, for multiple years to come. Beyond that, there's no certainty. He's not even getting the lion's share of the opportunities now. You think once he hits the free agent market, he's all of a sudden going to become some bell cow? So he's sitting at 26 in terms of usage, not efficiency. 26 in expected fantasy points per game in 2024, 21st in 2023. It's just not a profile I have very strong bets on, especially when we're talking about being a top 15 running back.
I think that's fair.
Same
And
with Chase Brown.
the contract situation, just so you know, I'm probably just looking at this, I'm probably a tad high on James Cook. If I could lower him to like 15 or 16, I probably should. I should probably have all of those tier 4 running backs ahead of him, to be honest with you. So I'm more in agreement with Matt than not. I was just kind of playing devil's advocate there. But I do think it's an interesting move. Like, cost is everything. So if like if we just look at keep trade cut, like you were doing a second ago, Josh Jacobs, Xavier Worthy, Chase Brown, like there's no way I'm paying a first for James Cook, but could I get a second plus a player I don't want? I don't know. It's just all options are on the table for me at all times. So if somebody's just wanting to throw away James Cook, I'd listen, but I think I agree with you. Let's move down to tier 5. I'll just throw up tier 5 and 6 right now because they're both kind of small. Quinshon Judkins we have at 16, Caleb Johnson at 17, RJ Harvey at 18, Christian McCaffrey at 19, Derrick Henry at 20, Alvin Kamara at 21, Joe Mixon at 22, rounding out tier 6, or the old tier. So we have the young tier with Judkins, Johnson, and RJ Harvey. It's funny how it shook out that way.
Yeah,
and then we have the old tier with McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and we don't really, not much disagreement here. I have RJ Harvey at 20. You have him at 15. Again, I probably need to make some adjustments here because I need to prop up these young players a little bit, I think. But any particular direction you want to go here?
Yeah, I would say, just to weirdly play devil's advocate to your rankings, like I think there are arguments for going a little older here. Like I said, when we're talking like startup value and like neutral value, it is all about calculated bets. So if you have gone very youthful and flimsy and risky, there's nothing really wrong with going with an Alvin Kamara, or a Joe Mixon. If you're already fragile and young, I wouldn't necessarily go like McCaffrey or Henry, but it's okay to go a little older. And I don't think that you have to necessarily prop these young running backs up over older ones just because they're older. But I think we're in an interesting situation here where you have all three of these guys in tier 5 were drafted with decent draft capital or great draft capital. Like RJ Harvey was a second round pick. And you have on the other side, people that are like 29, 30 years old. So on the cusp of like RB age. So it's this interesting oil and water scenario where you have like, it's not just that the fact that they're younger, it's that they're younger with good draft capital in situations where they'll be getting, high opportunity shares right off the bat. And that's why I couldn't necessarily put them over any of those guys, but I could totally see in a startup draft you getting to the point where you're taking a McCaffrey or a Henry or a Kamara or a Mixon. If you're a win now team, like there are rosters where I'm willing to, sell my soul a little bit and grab a Derrick Henry or a Christian McCaffrey if it means, potentially getting a 19, 20 fantasy point season and getting another championship or finally getting over the hump.
Yeah, this is another Christian McCaffrey. Man, I am very, very nervous about Christian McCaffrey.
Same.
I even have him higher than you at 17. Like if I look at Keep Trade Cut here, he is their RB 17. So I didn't mean to do that, but I feel like that's probably about right. But man, I I am really, really thinking hard about hitting the sell button on Christian McCaffrey just because last season was a travesty by Kyle Shanahan to not be open and honest with the public. Because I don't know about you, there was a fantasy draft I took him third overall in a super flex league, and he's going to be 29 years old. I get it. If he hits, he could certainly get back to the 25 fantasy points per game 2023 pace that he was, that 24 and a half RB1. He has that kind of upside probably still. He's Christian McCaffrey. But similarly to Saquon, it's like that all those hits, all that usage takes a toll. And unless you're named Derrick Henry, who is, I guess, ageless and impervious to pain. In fact, he inflicts pain on other people, like the Hurt Syndicate. He might as well be the fourth member of the Hurt Syndicate, Derrick Henry. He hurts people, but he just makes me so nervous, and I have to admit, I like building young. I like acquiring as much value as I can in a startup and in trades. That's always my philosophy, and I probably should have RJ Harvey ranked ahead of Christian McCaffrey just on principle, and I don't right now. So that's probably another adjustment I need to make. And this old tier down here with Kamara, Mixon, Henry, McCaffrey, you're absolutely right. If you are a win now team, it all depends on how your roster's constructed. You could definitely add one of these guys at a reasonable cost and prolong that window. That's what veterans are for. You could also go down some of the tiers. Like we'll talk about some of the other options. I typically try to fill my RB void with the cheapest possible option that I think is still going to do it for me. Because for me, and maybe we should have said this at the top, the running back and the tight end That's been an amendment to the rule, but for years I always said the RB is the cherry on top of the Dynasty Sunday. If you get a Jameer Gibbs or a Bijan in your rookie drafts, great. If they're the most valuable player, take them. But really, ideally, you build around quarterbacks and wide receivers in superflex leagues. Are we ready to move to tier 7, or do you have anything else to say about this tiers 5 and 6?
No, I think we wrapped up those nicely. Let's
All right.
let's close it out here.
All right. We're gonna close it out with tier 7 and Tony Pollard. I don't know if you can see Tony Pollard. So we have Chuba Hubbard, David Montgomery, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy, Bashul Tootin, Brian Robinson, DeAndre Swift, Cam Scatabo, and James Conner rounds out our top 30 or 31. I think it's 31. We give you, and Tony. Yeah. We'll just throw Tony Pollard in there too. Tony Pollard's our first running back in tier 8. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. Let me fix that. There we go. And you'll see a few bonus ones on the YouTube.
Trey Benson and Travis Etienne too. There you go.
There we go. So my initial thought on this tier is I feel relatively strongly the way things shook out for Tyrone Tracy. I think that he's going to be a trade target of mine. And it's funny because before the NFL draft, I was very nervous for Tyrone Tracy. I thought there would be a really good chance that it's the Giants, they're going to overdraft one of these running backs, and they were responsible, and they took Cam Scatabo in round 4. And I think Tyrone Tracy's going to lead that backfield, and I think that offense with Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston and a coaching staff that is fighting for their jobs is going to pull out all the tricks this year, and they're going to use their most talented player, and that's right now Tyrone Tracy in the backfield. I'm also willing to buy Isaiah Pacheco or David Montgomery. Isaiah Pacheco, he was hurt down the stretch, and that clearly affected his play. And look at what the Chiefs did this offseason. They didn't add a running back of note really at all. Not in the draft. I thought that there was a real chance that Bashul Tootin would have been a good fit for them, but they didn't do it. So that tells me that I don't think that's a vote of confidence in Kareem Hunt. I think that's a vote of confidence in Isaiah Pacheco. So those are just a couple names that I'm very intrigued by. And then you have the weirdness of DeAndre Swift, who just sneaks inside of our top 30 here. And I have him at 30, you have him at 28. And I'll just say this as a Bears fan, I don't think the Bears, and I love Kyle Monangai, who the Bears took in round 7. DeAndre Swift is still the best running back on the team. He is. I don't think that's a hot take. He's going to be the starting running back in a Ben Johnson offense. That's at least a little valuable, isn't it? I know everybody hates DeAndre Swift, but those 3 running backs right there, they're not sexy options. And I'm not saying you got to go rush out and buy them right now, but they're going to play the majority of the snaps in their backfield this year, aren't they?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. In relatively good offense. Like, say what you want to about the Giants, it won't be a good offense, but I think it'll be okay with Malik Neighbors. Really, Isaiah Pacheco and Swift are the ones where I go, okay, those offenses should be halfway decent.
Yeah, and Tracy I worry about just because I think Scatabo takes away some goal line and passing work. And just a little bit could be enough for Tracy because, he's probably not going to be a bell cow guy. And he had fumbling issues, and that's not good. So I have mixed feelings about how this is going to shake out for Tracy. I think maybe ranking Scatabo ahead of Tracy may have been a bit far. I think maybe I would have switched it to like 28, 29, and have like Tracy at 28 and Scatabo at 29 or something like that. But yeah, I do have concerns about him being I think he'll be the lead back. Maybe it's just about, by what percentage.
And both of us have Bashul Tootin ranked ahead of Travis Etienne, which I find interesting. I think Tootin has the most juice. I think it might take him some time to overtake Travis Etienne, but that's what we're projecting, and we don't have Tank Bigsby on the screen right now. So we're shooting for the moon with Bashul Tootin there. You have him at 24. I have him at 31. You want to talk about that scenario, because that's another fascinating backfield to me.
Yeah, I think you get a new regime that comes in, and I get it that it was the 4th round, but you get a new regime that comes in, and Cohen has shown with how he treated Bucky Irving and Rashad White that he's not just going to let some, inefficient plotter take up touches. He's not going to waste time on that. He's going to put in the back that gets it done. And I think there was a statement that was made where Cohen says, I am not confident enough in Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. I'm going to take Bashul Tootin. So obviously Etienne's time as a Jaguar is probably dwindling a little bit. I do think he's potentially a little bit underrated this season because he's the incumbent. He doesn't have to worry about, fumbling. I believe Tootin fumbled his first carry of minicamp. So, not something to read too far into, but also a little bit worrisome for somebody who did have a little bit of a fumbling problem in college. So he may take a few weeks to clean that up. But you look at his burst, his speed, his pass catching ability. He obviously passes the eye test. I think he's more explosive than Etienne and Bigsby. I think he's a better rusher. At least his college profile compared to, the unappetizing production that we've gotten from the two of them. I start to tend to lean to the new shiny toy. So I may be a little too far ahead on Tootin. But I think if he does take that step above the other two in this backfield, he will be like Bucky Irving, where Cohen is just, yeah, he's my guy. I'm going to use him.
Yeah, and I could also see Chuba Hubbard, who we have at 23, being a guy that I target as like a cheaper running back option because there isn't much competition there for him. And we know that once Dave Canales picks a guy, he generally sticks with them. And, Chuba Hubbard was doing some good things last year. So that is going to round out our top 30 running back rankings and tiers. I'll just go from the top and give you another recap here. Tier 1, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Jeanty at 1, 2, 3. Saquon and Devon Achane in Tier 2 at 4 and 5. Omarion Hanson, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving in Tier 3. Trevion Henderson, Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Chase Brown in Tier 4, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey in Tier 5, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, or the old tier, or Tier 6, and then Tier 7, Chuba Hubbard, David Montgomery, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy, Bashul Tootin, Brian Robinson, DeAndre Swift, Cam Scatterbo, and James Conner. That is the top 30 or 31 Dynasty running back rankings. If you liked what you saw tonight, click the like button. If you have a comment, leave it below. Click the subscribe button and click the alarm bell to be notified of new content when it drops. Matt Babich, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up this episode?
Follow me on Twitter at Babich_Matt10 and Ashton Jeanty and Jahmyr Gibbs. Let me start that over. Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton are both top 5 Dynasty running backs, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise.
He's Matt Babich. You can follow him at Babich_Matt10. Me, you can follow me at Seth_DIEWOLD on Twitter. You can follow the show at FF Dynasty Table. And until next time, nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, whatever part of your day you are in. Make it a great one, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.